I trusted my partner and wife, until I discovered their betrayal. In the early years of Hart and Warren Enterprises, Ethan Hart and Dylan Warren were an unbeatable team. Their shared vision and complementary skills turned a fledgling startup into an industry powerhouse. Ethan's methodical approach to strategy and Dylan's charm brought in investors and opportunities that seemed almost too good to be true. Their friendship deepened with every success, culminating in a joint celebration of their company's 5th anniversary. A night that marked the beginning of a deeper intertwining of their personal and professional lives. As their empire grew, cracks began to form in their partnership. Subtle disagreements over priorities and ethical boundaries crept into boardroom discussions. Ethan believed in discipline and long-term stability, while Dylan often pursued riskier ventures for quicker returns. Despite their differences, Ethan never doubted his partner's loyalty, nor did he question the sincerity of his wife, Glory, whose charm and elegance made her the perfect complement to his public image. However, the reality hidden behind polished facades would soon upend everything Ethan had built, both at work and at home. The dim glow of Ethan Hart's computer illuminated his tired face as he scrutinized financial data by the rain-streaked window of his home office. The rhythmic drumming of water on glass accompanied his late-night review, filling the otherwise silent mansion. Isabella claimed to be home, yet the vast estate felt hollow, as though her presence barely lingered. His cursor hesitated over a spreadsheet when a new notification caught his eye. Thomas Reed, his private investigator, had sent the weekly report. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he opened the message without hesitation. Photos loaded one by one. Isabella's silver Mercedes entering the Constellation Hotel's parking garage at 7:45 p.m. on Wednesday. Her emerging from the elevator, 40 minutes later, in a red dress, she'd said, was at the dry cleaners. And the final shot, Dylan Warren, his business partner, following her out. A few minutes later, adjusting his tie. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Hart. The housekeeper stood at the door. Mrs. Hart called. She won't be home until 11. Her dinner with Miss Orr is running late. Ethan checked his watch. 9:45 p.m. the same time. Isabella, always called on Wednesdays. Thanks, Sailor. You can go home once Sailor left. Ethan opened his safe and pulled out a leather-brown notebook, adding tonight's new details to a growing list. Membership across town. Her new interest in book club meetings with no books. His phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel Fox, his lawyer and oldest friend. Got your message, free for breakfast tomorrow. Ethan replied. 7 at the diner on 7th. Bring everything on Dylan's Singapore project. Closing his laptop, Ethan walked to the window, watching the rain blur the garden into shadows. 8 years of building. Hart and Warren Enterprises. From a startup to a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Now undone by a hotel keycard and a red dress. The front door opened, followed by the click of heels on marble. Isabella's life echoed her practice. Theatrical laugh, perfected for cherry galas. Ethan stayed still, listening. Her purse on the console heels kicked off the rustle of her coat. Alex. Her voice floated up the stairs. Still working. Darling. He turned, composing his face into a mask of mild interest. Just finishing up. How was dinner with Ava? Isabella appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair damp from the rain. The red dress was gone. You know Ava. 3 glasses of wine. And suddenly she's spilling all her dating drama. She kissed his cheek. Her perfume mixed with the familiar cologne he'd noticed on Dylan. You worked hard. Honey, come to bed in a bit. I need to review these reports for tomorrow's meeting. She pouted playfully. The company would collapse without you, wouldn't it? Her phone buzzed and her expression flickered before she tucked it away. Don't stay up too late. After Isabella left, Ethan returned to his desk and sent Thomas an email. Keep up. Surveillance. Focus on the financials. I need every restaurant, bill, hotel, charge, gift, and everything on Dylan's personal accounts. He leaned back, recalling the day he'd introduced Dylan to Isabella at the company's 5th anniversary party. Dylan had been charming everything Ethan knew, His wife would admire. Now he wondered if that night had been the start of it all. Every laugh and touch, a step toward betrayal. The rain picked up outside, masking the sound of Gloria's shower upstairs. Ethan opened the company's chart and studied it. Dylan might have Isabella, but Ethan had built something far more valuable. His network of loyal employees and board members, plus enough evidence of Dylan's recent missteps to ruin him professionally. He scrolled through his phone to Olivia King's number. The CFO had been raising concerns about Dylan's financials for months. Tomorrow's breakfast with Nathaniel would be just the beginning. But Olivia would be key to what came next. A text from Dylan flashed on his screen. Drinks tomorrow. Need to talk about the Singapore expansion. Ethan's lips curled into a cold smile as he typed. Can't breakfast with Nathaniel rain check. He powered down his computer, gathered his papers and listened to Isabella moving around. Upstairs, letting her excuses were working. Ethan knew revenge. Like success required patience. Precision in seeing 10 moves ahead while your opponent was still playing checkers. Tomorrow, he'd start positioning his pieces. But tonight he'd go upstairs and play the devoted husband. One last turn. The best victories were the ones your enemies never saw coming. At 655 a.m., the corner cafe on 7th Street was nearly empty. Ethan took his usual booth in the back. Elderly waitress who'd served him for 15 years. Brought his coffee without asking. The usual Mr. Hart. Thanks. Janet. Make it 2. Nathaniel's joining me. She nodded, glancing at the stack of folders on the table. Serious business today always. He replied with a rare smile, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Nathaniel Fox arrived 5 minutes later. His suit, a little rumpled from what Ethan assumed was another late night at the office. His briefcase was stuffed with documents as he slid into the booth. You look rough, Ethan said, pushing a coffee cup toward him. Spent all night on Dylan's Singapore files. Nathaniel replied, taking a long drink. It's worse than we thought. The whole project is built on speculation and creative accounting. Janet returned with their egg white omelets and wheat toast. A nod to their WI's health kick. Once she was out of earshot, Ethan said, show me everything. Nathaniel spread out a stack of reports between bites of toast. He's inflating projected returns using outdated market analysis to justify the investment. But this is where it gets interesting. He slid the document toward Ethan. Look at the subsidiary handling local contracts. Ethan scanned the paper, pausing. Warren Pacific Holdings. When did he set this up? 3 months ago. About the time your wife started those weekly dinners with K.A.D.O. Nathaniel set his tone. Careful. It's registered in Singapore, but the ownership is hidden behind shell companies. He's funneling development fees through it, marking up costs by 30. The board doesn't know. Ethan asked. Not yet. But Randall. Ramsey's been asking questions. You know how thorough he is without it. Ethan nodded. Randall's support. When he first proposed the merger that formed Hart and Warren Enterprises. What about Rebecca? Does Dylan's wife suspect anything? She's too focused on her gala. Nathaniel hesitated. But there's something else. My new girlfriend. Ava. Ethan interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Nathaniel nodded. Isabella. Friend? Ava said something interesting. Last night, Isabella has been asking about divorce lawyers, specifically ones who handle high net worth cases. Ethan's jaw tightened. Has she? Ava thinks Isabella is planning to leave you. She and Dylan have been meeting at the Constellation Hotel every Wednesday for the last 3 months. Ethan's voice was calm. I know. Nathaniel stared at him. How long have you known? Long enough, Ethan said, pulling out his phone and showing Nathaniel the pie's photos. I needed to be sure. Now I am. What's the plan? Nathaniel asked. First we get Olivia King cooperation as CFO. Her concerns about the Singapore project will carry weight with the board. Ethan replied, sipping his coffee. Then we start quietly working on other board members. Randall's questions were perfect timing. As for Isabella, his expression hardened. Let her think she's winning. If she wants to leave, fine. But it'll be on my terms. Janet appeared with the coffee pot. Refill. Gentlemen. Please. Ethan said, waiting until she left again. How quickly can you freeze Dylan's access to corporate accounts with enough proof? 24 hours. Nathaniel answered. But we'll need Olivia's sign-off. Ethan checked his watch. She'd be in her office by now. Tell her, I want to meet for lunch. A new spot near her office. She's been wanting to try. He gathered the documents. His movements controlled one more thing. Start divorce proceedings quietly. But don't file anything yet. Alex. Nathaniel leaned forward. His voice cautious. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. Ethan placed several bills on the table, covering their breakfast and leaving a generous tip for Janet. Dylan brought this on himself. He could have had any woman, but he chose my wife. Now he'll lose everything. His company, his reputation, his marriage, and Isabella. She'll learn that betrayal has consequences. He stood adjusting his tie. Send me the Singapore documents. I have a board meeting at 10. It's time to ask some very public questions about our expansion strategy. Nathaniel watched him leave, remembering the ambitious but cautious man he once knew in law school. Now Ethan moved like a carnivore. He dialed Olivia King's number. Whatever was coming. Dylan and Isabella had already lost Olivia's office on the 42nd floor, offered a panoramic city view. When Ethan arrived at 1 p.m., she was already sorting through documents. Lunch is here, she said without looking up. Figured we'd need privacy for this. Ethan studied Olivia's sharp features. Glasses perched on her nose. The methodical way she worked. She'd been with the company 6 years, trusted for her financial oversight. Never fooled by Dylan's charm. How bad is it? He asked. Olivia rubbed her eyes. Remember the cue to irregularities. It's worse. Dylan's manipulating project costs, creating fake vendors, inflating fees. The Singapore expansion is just the beginning. A knock interrupted them as lunch arrived after the delivery person left. Ethan unwrapped his sandwich. Show me everything. For the next hour. Detailed a web of financial misconduct. Shell companies' backdated contracts. Suspicious wire transfers. With each revelation, Ethan's expression grew colder. Look at this. Olivia said, pulling up another document. Dinner for two at Luce are charged as business development. A suite at the Constellation Hotel. Marked client meetings. Every Wednesday. Ethan's voice was low and controlled. Yes, Alex. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Isabella, working late. Don't wait up. Ethan showed Olivia the message, then pulled up the pie's photos. Her eyes widened as she flipped through them. That son of a witch, she whispered. I'm sorry. Don't be. Ethan replied. You've given me exactly what I needed. He leaned forward. The board meeting next month. I need you to present a full audit of the Singapore project. Every discrepancy. Every questionable decision. They'll crucify him. Olivia said. That's the plan. Ethan said. His smile cold. But first I need you to meet someone right on cue. Nathaniel entered carrying his briefcase. Miss King. He nodded. I believe you have some documents for me for the next hours. They strategized. Olivia provided documents. Nathaniel took notes, and Ethan watched as the city lights came on. One thing, Ethan said, as they wrapped up. This stays between us. Dylan thinks he's untouchable. Let's keep it that way. Back in his office, Ethan saw a message from Rebecca Warren, Dylan's wife. She asked if he'd be attending the annual charity gala next weekend. He confirmed, and then called Nathaniel. How much does Rebecca know about the foundation's funding? Ethan asked. Nothing yet. Why? Nathaniel replied. Because Dylan's been using company donations to fund it. Once the board sees Olivia's thought, the donations stop. Ethan said. We need to make sure she has other funding options. Set up a meeting with her next week. Tell her it's about increasing our support for the foundation. After hanging up, Ethan stood at his window, watching the city below. Somewhere, Isabella and Dylan were with each other, thinking they'd outsmarted him. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Isabella. Miss, You drinks with the girls. Don't work too hard. Ethan didn't respond instead. He began drafting an email to Randall Ramsey, requesting an emergency board meeting. The pieces were in place. The allies secured. It was just a matter of timing. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Him and Dylan at the company lunch, smiling, arms around each other. Tomorrow, he'd take it down tonight. It would remind him that in business as in marriage, trust was a weapon that hurt the most. When betrayed, the morning sun streamed through the boardrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. Board members filed in their usual chatter, subdued by the seriousness of today's agenda. Dylan Warren's proposed expansion plan at the head of the table. Dylan exuded confidence as he handed out presentation folders. What I'm about to show you will transform our position in the Asian market, he said, clicking through his PowerPoint slides. Ethan observed from his seat, noting Dylan's trembling hands. Despite his smooth delivery, Olivia King, sitting beside him, quietly arranged financial reports, ones that painted a much different picture than Dylan's glowing projections. The Singapore project is a huge opportunity. Dylan continued a $5 million investment with a 30% return within 18 months. Randall Ramsey, head of the audit committee, adjusted his glasses. Ambitious numbers. What's the basis for these projections? Market analysis and agreements with local partners, Dylan replied, his smile unwavering, though a bead of sweat formed at his temple. All the documentation is in your packets. Randall raised an eyebrow, pulling out another set of papers. I have the latest market reports from Singapore, and they show a 15% decline in the sector you're targeting. The room went cold. Dylan's smile faltered. Those reports must be outdated. Our research shows. I think we should hear from our CFO. Ethan interjected. All eyes turned to him. Olivia, what's your take? Olivia stood and connected her laptop to the projector, with charts and numbers that made several board members lean in. We've thoroughly analyzed the expansion. The returns Dylan presented. Assume a best-case scenario, and don't align with current market trends. We've also spotted concerning patterns in the preliminary expenditures. Dylan's face rang red. Those are just draft numbers I can explain. Please, Dylan said smoothly. Like the $2.3 million in consultant fees paid to Warren Pacific Holdings, a company registered in Singapore 3 months ago. The room erupted in murmurs. Dylan gripped the table, his knuckles white. That's standard for international deals. We needed a local entity that lists you as the sole beneficiary. Randall cut, and that's a conflict of interest. Dylan. Dylan turned to his partner, desperation creeping into his voice. You know how these deals work. Sometimes we need flexible arrangements. Met his gaze coldly. Does that flexibility usually involve charging personal expenses to the company, like weekly bookings at the Constellation Hotel? The room fell silent. Dylan's face went pale as the expense report appeared on the screen, with the hotel charges highlighted in red. I move to suspend the expansion plan until we complete a full audit, Randall said, his voice firm, and freeze all discretionary spending until we understand the scope of these issues. I second the motion, another board member added. Dylan looked around, seeing no allies among the board. This is ridiculous. Ethan, we built this company together. You tell all in favor. Ethan's calm voice cut through the tension. Hands rose around the table. Dylan's confidence crumbled as his empire began to unravel. Motion carried. Ethan announced, Olivia, secure all relevant accounts by the end of today. Dylan, you'll be available for the audit team's questions. As the board members filed out, Dylan stayed rooted to the spot, staring at the damning numbers on the screen. Ethan gathered his papers, slowly feeling Dylan's eyes on him. How long have you known? Dylan whispered. Ethan paused at the door long enough to know betrayal comes in many forms. Some professional, some personal. He turned to face Dylan. Some I'll deal with later. Dylan's face drained of color as understanding dawned before he could respond. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Isabella. Lunch today. Miss, you should answer that, Ethan said, Noting Dylan's instinctive move toward his own phone. It might be important. He left the boardroom, leaving Dylan to face the wreckage of his plans. In the elevator, Ethan quickly messaged Nathaniel. Phase 1. Complete. Proceed with Phase 2 at home. Ethan reviewed audit reports in his office, his sanctuary in the battle against Dylan's betrayal. The evening sun cast long shadows across his desk. When Isabella appeared in the doorway dressed in a designer outfit. You've been impossible to reach today, she said, irritation in her voice. Board meeting ran long. Russ expansion planned and goes planned, Ethan replied, not looking up. Isabella's fingers tightened around her phone. That's surprising. He seemed so confident. Confidence doesn't always mean competence, Ethan said. Finally, looking up, he noticed her lipstick was freshly replete. How was your day? Fine. Lunch with Iga shopping, she answered, her tone slightly off. You've been working so much lately. I barely see you anymore. The Singapore project needs attention, Ethan replied, watching her closely. Dylan's decisions have put us in a tough spot. Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression flickering with concern. I should let you work. Will you be up soon? Don't wait up, Ethan replied. After Isabella left, Ethan opened his laptop and sifted through surveillance photos of her and Dylan at Lobernot Den. That afternoon they sat close, his hand covering hers, speaking in urgent whispers. The photos came with a note from his pa. Warren looked agitated. Meeting lasted 47 minutes. His phone rang. Nathaniel Fox. The charity galas this weekend. Rebecca Hopkins confirmed your attendance. Perfect, Ethan replied. And Isabella? Have I convinced her to go shopping for a new dress tomorrow? She'll make sure it's something memorable. The weekend arrived with perfect weather for the Hopkins Foundation's annual gala held at the Metropolitan Museum's rooftop garden. It was a glittering affair. Ethan arrived fashionably late and noticed how Dylan and Isabella carefully maintained their distance, stealing nervous glances when they thought no one was watching. Rebecca Hopkins, radiant in midnight blue, greeted him warmly. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. He kissed her cheek, aware of Dylan watching from across the garden. Your foundation's work is impressive. I've been reviewing the reports. Thank you. She smiled though. I'm a bit worried about next year's funding. Dylan's been evasive about the company's usual contribution. Has he? Ethan guided her to a quiet corner. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you. I'm particularly interested in your educational initiatives. They stood close enough to where Isabella was with Ava, pretending not to watch Dylan struggle to network with board members who suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. Your work is important, Ethan said louder. Now it'd be a shame if anything threatened its funding. Rebecca's eyes widened. What do you mean? Maybe we should review the foundation's financial structure over lunch next week. I might have suggestions for its long-term stability later. As the party wound down, Ethan watched Isabella and Dylan share a brief tense conversation by the elevators. Their distance, her fidgeting with her clutch, and Dylan's subtle shake of his head. All signal panic. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Order team. Found something big. Emergency board meeting for Monday. Monday. Ethan sipped his champagne, watching his wife and business partner realize their world was falling apart. Timing was everything. Monday brought steady rain, turning Manhattan into a maze of umbrellas and traffic. Ethan sat Mrs. Reports from the audit team, flooding his inbox. A knock on his door revealed Nathaniel. His face grim. Dylan's been trying to access restricted accounts. 3 attempts to wire funds to Singapore. Desperate men make desperate choices, Ethan said, turning from the window. What's his financial situation bad? He's leveraged everything on this expansion with the board, freezing the project he's starting to crack as if on cue. Dylan barged in panic, replacing his usual polish. This has gone far enough. Ethan, call off the audit. Sit down, Dylan. Ethan's tone was firm. Nathaniel, give us a minute. Once alone, Dylan paced. You're destroying everything we built over what a disagreement. Is that what we're calling it? Ethan's voice was calm this afternoon. The board will receive a report on your financial misconduct. Unauthorized accounts, embezzled funds, fake consultancy fees, personal expenses charged to the company, including hotel rooms. Dylan froze. Alex, don't. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Ethan said, cutting him off. I knew about you and Isabella. You've been sloppy, now you'll lose everything. Your position, reputation, marriage. You can't prove anything I already have. Ethan slid a folder across the desk. The board meets at 2. You might want to consider resigning before they see this. Dylan snatched the folder, shaking as he flipped through the evidence without a word. He stormed out. The morning passed in a blur of meetings. By lunch, the office buzzed with rumors of something big. Ethan worked through his sandwich, reviewing his presentation for the board. His phone lit up with a text from Isabella. We need to talk, coming to your office. Minutes later, she stood in his doorway. Her usual confidence, replaced by nervous energy. What have you done to Dylan? I haven't done anything, Ethan replied, coolly. His own actions caught up with him. Shin. Falling apart, Isabella said, voice shaking. You called me this morning talking about leaving the country. Are you worried about your lover or your lifestyle? Ethan's question cut through her protests. Don't worry. You'll both get exactly what you deserve. She stared at him, realization sinking in. You knew all this time you knew about us. Did you think you were clever? The Wednesday night dinners, the secret business meetings. He walked to the window. You should go home. Isabella. Peck. What matters to you? The next few days will be unpleasant. You can't do this. I already have. He turned back to her. It's done, all of it. Before she could respond, his intercom buzzed. Mr. Hart. The board is assembling. Thank you, Sarah. He gathered his papers. You should go. Isabella. Your boyfriend has an important meeting to attend. Ethan entered the boardroom at exactly 2 p.m., followed by Olivia King and Nathaniel Dillon at the far end of the table. His usual allies missing. For the next hour, Olivia presented their findings. Bank statements, wire transfers, and falsified reports. The evidence piled up, stripping Dylan of any remaining dignity. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. Warren was removed from his position and his access to company resources was terminated as security arrived to escort him out. Dylan turned to Ethan. One last time. What are you happy now? Ethan straightened his tie, unaffected by the wreckage around him. Happiness was never the goal. Dylan. Justice was later that evening. Ethan sat in his home office waiting. He heard Isabella's heels on the stairs, her nervous energy palpable. Ethan through the closed door. His phone buzzed with the message from Nathaniel. It's done. All accounts. Frozen. Divorce papers ready. Ethan closed his laptop. Listening to Isabella's footsteps draw closer. The trap had closed perfectly, but there was still one final scene to play out. Rain hit the windows as Isabella paced in front of Ethan's desk, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Her earlier confidence was cracking under his steady gaze. Why aren't you angry? She demanded, her voice rising. I just told you I've been heartping with your business partner for months. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Come. Tell me, Isabella, after all those months with Dylan, did you ever wonder why it was so easy? Why? I never questioned your Wednesday night dinners or your sudden interest in Ava's love life. Her face drained of color. What do you mean? I mean, he said, opening his laptop, that Dylan's about to learn a hard lesson about mixing pleasure with business. He turned the screen toward her, showing documents that made her stumble back into the chair. That's impossible, she whispered. The board's emergency meeting concluded an hour ago, Ethan said with a cold smile. Dylan's financial misconduct has forced an emergency restructuring. Your lover doesn't know it yet, but his company now belongs to me. Isabella gripped the armrests. You're lying. Dylan would have told me if he was losing everything. If his Singapore project was built on embezzled funds. Ethan walked to the drink cart. Dylan's too busy watching his empire crumble to warn his mistress. Want to see the termination papers? They're quite thorough. Termination. She jumped to her feet. You can't fire him. He built this company with you. And then he betrayed everything we built, Ethan said, pouring himself a scotch. The board voted unanimously. Dylan will be removed as CEO tomorrow. Meanwhile, Rebecca has already filed for divorce with evidence of his financial misconduct. Isabella collapsed into the chair, her arrogance crumbling. Rebecca knows about the affair. Not yet, Ethan replied, sipping his drink. But she knows about Dylan using company funds to finance your Renver. The shell companies. The misappropriated assets. She's grateful for my help, protecting our foundation's interests. The foundation. Isabella's eyes widened the gala when you told Rebecca. It would be a shame if anything threatened the funding. I was making sure she understood her options, Ethan said. His phone buzzed with a confirmation from Nathaniel. Just as I'm ensuring you understand yours. Isabella. Panic turned to desperation. Alex. Please. We can fix this. I made a terrible mistake. But save it. He cut her off. I've watched you play the devoted wife for months. It's not convincing anymore. You cold-hearted fool. She spat. You set up all those business meetings. The late nights. You were orchestrating this. No, Isabella. Ethan said. Quietly, but firmly. You and Dylan orchestrated your own downfall. I just made sure you had enough rope to hang yourselves. He moved to the window. Dylan chose to embezzle company funds to impress his mistress. You chose to betray our marriage for cheap thrills with him. I simply chose the consequence. Her phone buzzed. Dylan's name flashing on the screen. Ethan smiled as she stared at it. Panic rising. You should answer that. I imagine he has quite a bit to say about tomorrow's board announcement. Isabella grabbed her phone, reading Dylan's frantic messages. This will destroy him, she whispered. That was the point, Ethan replied, his voice devoid of remorse. Did you really think you could flaunt your affair, spend my money and face no consequences? I'll fight you, she threatened weakly. Both of us. Will? Both of us. He laughed coldly. Isabella. Dylan's facing criminal charges for financial fraud. His assets are frozen. His reputation is ruined. And his wife's lawyers are circling. He won't be fighting anyone except prosecutors. The rain intensified, matching the storm on Isabella's face. Another message from Dylan flashed on her phone. He's being escorted out of the building. As we speak, Ethan said security is quite efficient when properly motivated. Isabella stood unsteadily, fear replacing her earlier confidence. What happens now? Ethan said, sliding a thick envelope across the desk. You leave the divorce papers already. Your things will be moved to storage. Your access to our accounts has already been terminated. You can't just I can. And I have, he replied. The prenuptial agreement you signed is very clear about infidelity. You'll find the terms on Jimru's. Isabella stared at the envelope, tears breaking through her composure. But Ethan saw no remorse, only the realization that her world was collapsing. Why like this? She asked. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Barely audible. You could have confronted us months ago. Ethan's expression remained unchanged because revenge, like business, requires patience and precision. You thought Dylan was the powerful partner. I wanted you both to understand how wrong you were. Her phone buzzed one last time. Another message from Dylan, which drained the color from her face. Hey, he then noted. He's heard from Rebecca's lawyers. Timing is everything, isn't it? The rain continued, its steady rhythm as Isabella realized the full impact of her choices in one evening. She lost her marriage lifestyle. And the man. She'd risked everything for Ethan. The husband she'd underestimated. Watched her world burn with cold detachment. The next morning was bright and unforgiving. Dylan Warren arrived at Hart & Warren Enterprises for the last time, surrounded by security guards and a dozen smartphone cameras. I'm sorry, Mr. Warren said. James, head of security, blocking his path. Your access has been revoked. This is my company. Dylan yelled, his anger palpable. Not anymore. Nathaniel Fox is stepping forward with two attorneys. The board's decision is final. Don't make this worse than it already is. Inside, employees watched from the windows as Dylan's meltdown continued. His suit couldn't hide the sweat pouring down his neck as he pointed at Nathaniel. Was Ethan too scared to face me? Mr. Hart asked at a board meeting. Nathaniel replied, his tone cold HEK, discussing the company's future with our new partners like Mrs. Warren. The mention of his wife struck Dylan like a punch. Rebecca. What do you mean? Nathaniel handed him a thick envelope. These are from my lawyers, along with the divorce papers. You'll find a record of your financial misconduct. Dylan ripped open the envelope, his face turning from red to pale as he read the documents. This is impossible. These accounts were private. Nothing's private when you misuse company funds, Nathaniel said, glancing at his watch. A car is waiting to take you home. I suggest you pack up your office under supervision. Of course. Meanwhile, Olivia King watched from her office, texting Ethan's status. He's here, starting to realize what he's lost. Good. Keep me updated in the lobby. Isabella arrived in last night's clothes. Mascara. Sneered, demanding to see Ethan. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart, the receptionist said flatly. You've been removed from the authorized visitor list. Removed. Isabella's voice rose. I'm his wife. Not for long. A familiar voice cut in. Ko stood by the security desk, now wearing a legal department badge. Isabella. Don't make this worse. What are you doing here? Isabella snapped, watching. Kara Eva replied, a cold smile on her face. All those Wednesday night dinners. You need it covered. I passed every detail to Nathaniel. My boyfriend found them interesting. Isabella's face drained of color. You were spying on me, she whispered. Horrified guess. Ethan noticed more than you thought, Ava said. Her tone sharp as Isabella's protest grew louder. Security moved in. Dylan, packing his things in the conference room, could only watch as his world collapsed upstairs. Ethan sat with Rebecca Hopkins Warren, finalizing the foundation's new funding structure. The board approved a 5-year commitment. He explained, your educational initiatives will be fully funded, no matter what happens with the company. Rebecca signed the documents with steady hands. I should have seen this coming. He fooled a lot of people, Ethan replied, his tone neutral. The real question is what's next. Protect what I've built, she said, firmly. Dylan can lose everything, but he won't take my foundation down. As their meeting continued, commotion from the lobby caught their attention through the glass walls. They saw Isabella being escorted out, her dignity shattered as she shouted at anyone nearby. Hell, hath no fury, Rebecca remarked, like a gold digger scorned. Heath and Nat had returning to their papers. Now about the new board structure. The day folded as a perfect storm of destruction. Dylan's personal items were boxed up and shipped. His executive parking spot was reassigned. His name was removed from the company letterhead by evening news outlets buzzed with updates on the corporate shakeup. Social media was alright with speculation about the future of the Singapore project, while society columnists whispered about the twin divorces shaking Manhattan's elite in his office. Ethan watched the sun set over the city. His phone buzzed non-stop, messages from board members, employees and reporters. But one message stood out from Isabella. I hope you're happy you've destroyed everything. He typed back. No, Isabella. You did that yourself. 2 months passed and Hart International emerged from the storm of change. The Warren name was gone, replaced by a sharp TK new logo that symbolized Ethan's successful takeover. Employees, not fearful, but in awe, respected the precision with which he transformed the company. In his expanded corner office, Ethan reviewed the latest quarterly reports. The numbers reflected recovery and growth. Investor confidence restored, stock prices stable, and the Singapore project thriving under new management. A knock on the door interrupted his focus. Olivia King entered with a bottle of champagne. Thought you might want to celebrate, she said, setting the bottle down. The set just closed their investigation into Russell's activities. Criminal charges. Ethan asked, accepting the glass. She offered multiple accounts of financial fraud. His lawyers are scrambling for a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming. Ethan smiled faintly. Nathaniel doesn't miss a detail. Olivia continued. Isabella's divorce was finalized this morning. Ava said. She's staying with her sister in Connecticut. Running away is all she's good at. Ethan replied, glancing out the window at the city below. His empire reflected in the glass. Olivia pulled up a news article on her tablet. Have you seen today's society pages? She asked, handing it to him. The headline read, Double Divorce. Drama Manhattan. Power couples fall from grace. The photo showed Dylan leading court looking years older, clutching legal papers. Rebecca's foundation is thriving. Olivia added the new board position suits her. She earned it, Ethan said, his tone genuine. She understands what it means to build something real. His phone buzzed with an email from Nathaniel. Dylan's remaining assets had been seized. The once powerful man now faced jail time and a ruined reputation. You planned this perfectly, Olivia remarked. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't a plan. I just made sure I was prepared. That's all we can do. A comfortable silence followed as they watched. The city lights flicker on. Workers filtered out of the building, their lives unaffected by the corporate drama. Do you regret any of it? Olivia asked, breaking the quiet. Ethan considered the question. They made their choices. I just made sure there were consequences. His computer chimed with new projections, showing Heart International's strongest performance yet. Success, it seemed, was the sweetest revenge. 2 years later, Heart International's transformation was complete. The Singapore project, once a symbol of mismanagement, was now the company's most profitable division. Investor confidence soared, and Forbes published an article from betrayal to billionaire. The rise of Ethan Hart. Meanwhile, Isabella faded from the spotlight, struggling to rebuild in Connecticut. Her once glamorous life had become a cautionary tale. Her social media profiles vanished after relentless trolling. Her fall from grace, now a whispered story. She was last seen working as a real estate agent, far removed from her past. Dylan fared no better. The sex investigation had revealed financial fraud, leading to his indictment. After a brief trial, he accepted a plea deal: 5 years in a minimum security prison, complete asset forfeiture, and a lifetime ban from any publicly traded company in prison. Dylan reportedly spent his days following Heart International, stalker, a daily reminder of his downfall. 5 years later, Heart International's headquarters towered above Manhattan's skyline, a symbol of Ethan's dominance. The company's rise was now a case study in corporate resilience. Inside his office, Ethan reviewed acquisition reports. Heart International's market value had tripled since Dylan's fall, each success proving Ethan's belief that betrayals, when handled correctly, could become opportunities. A knock at the door revealed Nathaniel Fox, now chief legal officer, and his wife Ava. Their marriage, celebrated 2 years ago, had marked the union of two key players in Dylan and Isabella's downfall. But you want to see this, Nathaniel said, placing the newspaper on Ethan's desk. The headline read, Former Executive, Dylan Warren denied early release. 3 years down. 2 to go, Ava remarked, settling into a chair. The judge wasn't impressed by his appeal. Ethan scanned the article, noting that Dylan's fall was complete after his release. The terms of his plea deal would prevent him from rebuilding his life. Any word on Isabella? Ethan asked. Ava smiled. Still hiding in Connecticut. Her sister kicked her out last year. She's working as a real estate agent now, trying to rebuild her life. Nathaniel added. Her social media is enlightening. The woman who once attended the elite charity galas now advertises suburban halls. Her designer wardrobe replaced with practical suits. Ethan glanced briefly at the photo on Nathaniel's screen before returning to the documents on his desk. She tried dating an executive last year, Nathaniel noted until he Googled her. Your story is quite the cautionary tale in certain circles, Ava added with a smirk. Ethan's phone buzzed with an email from Olivia King. Now his trusted CFO. The latest quarterly numbers exceeded projections. Again, a testament to her skill in untangling Dylan's financial mess. Rebecca's foundation just partnered with the Gates Foundation, Ethan said, showing a press release. Maintaining that funding was one of our smartest decisions. Rebecca Hopkins had shed the Warren name after her divorce and turned her humiliation into triumph. Her foundation now operated in 12 countries and thrived alongside her marriage to a respected federal judge. Did you see Dylan's latest appeal? Nathaniel asked, handing Ethan a documentation, claiming mental distress, blaming, shame, and isolation for his struggles. Prison ends to do that. Alexander replied without sympathy. The report detailed Dylan's current state: asset seized, reputation destroyed, and a lifetime ban from corporate leadership. Even his former allies avoided him. Isabella tried visiting him last year. Ava said he refused, blaming her for everything, claiming her demands during the affair forced him to embezzle. Ethan chuckled. They deserved each other. His intercom buzzed, reminding him of the board meeting 5 years after the scandal. Heart International's board was unrecognizable, rebuilt with loyal and competent members who shared Ethan's vision. One more thing, Nathaniel said. Isabella's lawyer contacted us. She's writing a memoir and wants the NDA lifted. Absolutely not, Ethan replied firmly. She made her choices, and she doesn't get to profit from them. After Nathaniel and Dava left, Ethan stood by his office window, surveying his empire. 5 years ago, he'd watched Isabella and Dylan's worlds collapse. Now his company thrived, a testament to his calculated decisions. A news alert flashed on his phone. Dylan, Warren's latest business venture files for bankruptcy. Even from prison, his attempts to rebuild had failed, thanks in part to Ethan's quiet influence, which ensured no one would work with him. Another message arrived from a private investigator. Isabella's real estate career barely covered her rent in a modest Connecticut apartment. The once glamorous socialite now struggled to rebuild her life, aging quickly, without the luxury treatment she'd once relied on. Her past haunted her. Potential suitors disappeared after a simple Google search, and her notoriety had earned her a Wikipedia page as a cautionary tale. Olivia King knocked and entered, tablet in hand. The Singapore expansion is exceeding projections, she said. Ironic, given Dylan's disaster. They exposed everything. Failure often lays the foundation for success, Ethan replied, gesturing for her to sit. Rebecca's latest project is impressive. Olivia continued, showing him a presentation. Her foundation is revolutionizing STEM education in developing countries, and the Gates partnership is just the start. Ethan nodded, thinking of how Rebecca had rebuilt her life. Her foundation and new marriage reflected resilience, a sharp contrast to Dylan's downfall. The charity gala is next month, Olivia noted. Rebecca wants you there. It's at the Met again, where it all started falling apart for them. The symmetry isn't lost on me, Ethan said. An email from Nathaniel arrived, confirmed, affirming Dylan's latest appeal had been denied. The judge's remarks were harsh. Mr. Warren's distress stems not from remorse, but from the consequences of his actions. Did you see his daughter's wedding announcement? Olivia asked. Ethan had Lauren Warren, Dylan's only child, had married recently. With the announcement mentioning only her mother and stepfather, Dylan's name and presence were notably absent, rejected. Even in small contributions, Lauren's focused on the foundation. Now, Olivia said, working with her mother to salvage something positive from her father's disgrace. Ethan glanced at the city lights and smiled faintly. Choices had consequences, and while others had fallen, he had risen higher than ever. A notification lit up Ethan's phone. An alert from his building security. Isabella had tried to enter the lobby again, claiming she had important documents for him. Like her previous attempts, each more desperate than the last, this one ended with security escorting her out politely, but firmly. Still trying, Olivia commented. Still failing, Ethan replied, Some lessons take longer to learn. His calendar reminder popped up dinner with Nathaniel and Dava to celebrate their second anniversary. Their relationship, formed after a betrayal, had become something real. Of his role in exposing Isabella's infidelity had not only won Nathaniel's love, but also secured her a position in Heart International's growing legal team. The book deal rejection came through, Olivia said, opening another email. Fourth publisher to turn down Isabella's memoir, even with the NDA lifted. No one wants to touch a story that makes the author look so unsympathetic. Ethan smiled faintly. Karma writes better endings than any publisher. As dusk settled in, the city lights began to sparkle each window in the nearby towers, reminding him of how far he'd come since that rainy night. When he first saw the Pyth photos, his empire had expanded, built stronger by the crisis that should have worn it apart. The next morning, a news alert made Ethan pause. Dylan Warren had attempted self-destruction in his prison cell. He survived, but the incident report painted the picture of a man finally undone by his own choices. He left a note. Nathaniel told him over an emergency breakfast at the corner cafe, the same booth where they had plotted Dylan's downfall 5 years ago. Mostly rambling, Nathaniel said, but he mentioned Isabella said she was the beautiful poison that destroyed everything he built. Ethan stirred his coffee, recalling the ambitious partner who'd helped create Heart and Warren Enterprises. Send flowers to Rebecca and Lauren, he said. They may have divorced him, but they shouldn't hear about this from the media already done. Nathaniel replied, sliding a folder across the table. This happened when I was in the first or second year at junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Isabella's sister finally spoke to the press. Apparently, Isabella's been spiraling since she lost her real estate license last month. Something about forging documents to inflate her sales numbers. Old habits, Ethan said. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. She never understood that real success takes more than just appearances. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Janet's still serving, after all these years, brought their usual orders. Saw your company's name in the papers. Again, Mr. Hart, she remarked. Something about a new tech division. Ethan nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. Heart International's latest push into artificial intelligence had made headlines and drawn investor interest. The stock had surged 15 points overnight. The Singapore office sends their quarterly reports today, Nathaniel added. After Janet left, the project Dill nearly destroyed is now our most profitable division. Sometimes I wonder if he follows the company's success from his cell. He does. Ethan pulled up an email on his phone. The prison psychiatrist had reached out via official channels. Apparently, Dylan was obsessed with Heart International stock ticker, checking it daily in the prison library. The morning light caught the silver in Ethan's hair. At 50, he'd become what Dylan had only pretended to be, a real business. Titan respected. Not for charm, but for substance. His phone lit up with a message from Olivia. Look, who's making headlines? Again, the link led to a small Connecticut newspaper. Isabella Edwards, the former Manhattan socialite, had been arrested for drunk driving after causing a scene at her ex-boyfriend's engagement party. The article naturally mentioned her past. It always did. She tried to reach out to Dylan's daughter last week. Nathaniel added. Lauren blocked her number and reported her full-on treatment. Apparently, Isabella thought she could convince Lauren to support her book project. The real story of what happened. That's irony for you, Ethan mused. She finally wants to tell the truth, but no one's interested. Their conversation was interrupted by another message, this time from Rebecca. The Foundation's new educational center would open next month. Would Ethan do the honors at the ribbon cutting? The press would love the symmetry. The man who'd saved the Foundation from her ex-husband's misconduct, helping launch its greatest achievement. Life has a way of sorting itself out. Ethan observed, typing his acceptance. Rebecca had built something real. Isabella and Dylan had built only illusions later that evening. In his office high above Manhattan, Ethan reviewed a personal document. He rarely opened his original plan rafted the night. He'd first seen the pious photos of Isabella and Dylan. Every step had been laid out. The careful gathering of evidence, the strategic positioning of allies, the precise timing of each revelation. But the document's final page held something he'd never shared with anyone. A list of possible outcomes for all involved. He predicted Dylan's financial collapse, Isabella's social fall, and even the likelihood of attempted comebacks and reconciliations. What he hadn't predicted was how complete their destruction would be. How thoroughly their own choices would compound the consequences he had set in motion. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hart, Mrs. Cornell is here. Rebecca says it's urgent." Rebecca entered his office, looking every bit a sophisticated philanthropist she'd become. Marriage to Judge Cornell had erased the last traces of the uncertain woman she'd been as Dylan's wife. "I thought you should hear this from me first." She began, taking a seat. "Dylan's being transferred to the prison psychiatric unit. The self-destruction attempt. It's worse than they first reported. The doctors say he's had a complete breakdown. He keeps talking about Wednesday nights in hotel rooms, about how he should have seen the signs." Ethan absorbed this, silently recalling another conversation in this office years ago, when he'd promised Rebecca that her foundation would survive Dylan's downfall. "Lauren asked me to tell you something else," Rebecca continued. "She's legally changing her name. She wants no connection to Dylan Warren anymore. The foundation will be her legacy. Now, not his." Ethan's gaze drifted to the city lights flickering to life outside his window as day turned to night. Somewhere in Connecticut, Isabella was probably facing the consequences of her latest public meltdown in a prison psychiatric ward. Dylan Warren was finally confronting the true cost of his choices. And here in the heart of the empire they tried to destroy, Ethan Hart sat with the woman who'd risen from the same meshes that had consumed them. "We all make choices," he said. "Finally, some of us choose to build, others to betray. The difference is in living with the consequences." Rebecca smiled, understanding in her eyes. "You never just wanted revenge, did you? Wanted justice." "I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away." Ethan corrected the rest. "They did to themselves." As night fell over Manhattan, Ethan Hart stood at his window, master of an empire built from the ruins of betrayal. Below, the city pulsed with life. Each light, a reminder that endings were just beginnings in disguise. He'd lost a wife and a business partner, but gained something far more valuable. Proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just about destroying the old, but building something stronger in its place. His phone buzzed one last time. Nathaniel confirming tomorrow's board meeting. Another quarter, another success, another step forward. While others remained trapped by the consequences of their past, Ethan reflected true power wasn't in the ability to take revenge, but in the strength to transform it into triumph. The city lights twinkled like stars, each one a testament to the empire he'd built from betrayal's ashes. While somewhere in the darkness, to people who once thought themselves clever enough to deceive him, if they had the long cold reality of their choices. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.